Zoom celebration. For attending the Zoom celebration. Sorry it couldn't be in person, but hey, at least we get something where we can share our memories and do it together. Oh, I see Pat joining us.
Okay, all right, okay, bye-bye.
So before we get started, just a few things. As Ashley said, it is being recorded so that if you want to go back later or want someone else, if someone else wants to watch it, it will be on the YouTube page for Allegheny County Library System. And also we'll try to keep it about an hour. And when someone else is speaking with multiple participants, if you could please mute yourself when others are talking to reduce the echo. But we'll have a comment period on the end and we can take turns unmuting and sharing stories. So it looks like pretty much everyone has gotten back in. So we'll do. So we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, last year, 2020 was our 50th anniversary, and we hope to have something in person. But of course, COVID came along, so we decided to do it virtually this year and at least still get to celebrate it. And as part of my library associate training, part of our capstone is to develop a program. So I worked with my coworker, Kathy and Ashley and Renee and John to get this going so we could at least see each other, if only over a computer screen. So thanks everybody for coming. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to John.
Great, thank you. I'm up here in this window. Good evening and thanks everyone for joining us tonight as we celebrate 50 years of library service in the Westernport community. My name is John Taube and I have the good fortune of being the executive director of the Allegheny County Library System. And I also have the good fortune of working with Maureen and Kathy, who are our star staff at the Westernport branch. I also have the good fortune of working with Nancy and Pam and Kay, who might join us later on in the call. So that's very exciting. So compared to the life of the Westernport Library, my tenure with the library system is relatively short. I did get to play a role in the 2008 renovation of the Westernport Library and the creation of the Reeves Woods. And I'm very proud to say, I'm very proud of that project and the work we did and our investment in the Westernport community. I just want to brag a little bit and say that the Westernport renovation in 2008 and the Reeves Woods won an American Institute of Architects Design Award in the year that we opened. So I'm very excited to brag on that nice fact. But when I think about, the milestones that have happened over the last 50 years there, I can't help but think that this past year is also going to be one of those milestone years because, if you think about how the staff at all the libraries and at Westernport have just sort of dug in and innovated and tried new things. I mean, we started our very first telephone reference service this past year. We've conducted virtual book clubs to keep our communities reading. The use of our ebooks and e-audiobooks has jumped 40% in the last year. We took all of our children's programs that used to be indoors and we moved them outside to the parks. And now we have a highly successful story time in the parks that I think we're not going to be able to stop doing next summer. So that's going to be exciting. And the pièce de résistance so far is the highly successful sidewalk service, where we've recreated how people use the library to the best of our ability, all the while keeping our staff and our community safe. So I think that's an important point to continue to emphasize. But with all that they've done in the last year, I just can't wait to see what's going to happen in the next 50 years with Maureen and Kathy there. So I just wanted to say thank you to Kathy and Maureen for carrying the torch on to the next 50 years of excellence at the Westernport Library and delivering great service to the Westernport community. So with that, I will stay brief Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks, John. All right, and now we'll hear from Kathy.
Well, for those that don't know me, I am Kathy Murphy. I am the service leader here at the Westernport branch. I've been here 3 years, and I want to congratulate and thank Maureen for choosing Westernport's 50th anniversary as her capstone project for her library associate training. I have lived in Westernport all my life, and I know my hometown library has been an essential part of the community. The library is always growing, evolving with the times. We all learned that this year with COVID. Although our doors aren't open to the public, we offer curbside service Monday through Thursday, 2:30 to 5, as well as virtual story times, yoga, and book clubs. Without change, the library will cease to be relevant. Over the years, the library system has added technology, ebooks, virtual reference, and databases. Despite the changes over the decades, ask most people what a library meant, and you'll probably find the answer to be a quiet space for books and studying. On another note, you will find several links to archive newspaper articles from the Piedmont Herald pertaining to the dedication and opening of the Westernport branch in 1970. Ashley, do you have that you can open? Okay.
I do. Let me.
Ashley's going to show us.
Can everybody see my screen? It's the Wet Library website. All right, awesome. I will head to the Westernport 50th anniversary page then.
But we want to thank the staff at the Mary F. Shipper Library at Potomac State College of West Virginia University for digitizing the West Virginia newspapers, which include the Piedmont Herald. Those links made it possible for us to share our history of the library with you tonight. To find the link, go to the library's homepage and click on online sources, then newspaper and magazines. Scroll to the West Virginia newspapers portal and click on that link. And then it brings up the different newspapers that you can browse through, including the Piedmont Herald. And that's just one of the features that we have on our website that's available to the public. Back to you, Maureen.
All right. So next we're going to hear from Pat Mccarty and Shirley Mccarty, who are members of the Westernport Historical Society, and they're going to share some of what they learned about the history of the library and of the town of Westernport at the time. So we'll hear from Pat. I think he's here. Let's see. I think he just needs to unmute. There we go.
I didn't realize I was still muted. Let me get up here. And
You're good, Pat.
Yep.
There we go. All right. You're good to talk, Pat. You're on.
okay, thank you so very much. Shirley and I really enjoy being here. We have a long history of librarians in the family. Shirley, a librarian in Harford County before she retired. Say hello there.
Hello.
And
Hey, Shirley.
her father's twin sister was Mrs. Bright, who was the librarian and English teacher at Piedmont High School for many, many years. So we kind of feel like, and then of course the history thing, we're bound to. We've been actually working right now on a book on the early history of Piedmont with my researcher and writer friend Tom Cogan, and many of you who are here on this broadcast will remember Tom very much. It is my pleasure to share with you some of the history and some special memories of the Westernport Library. I go back far enough now that I can call Mrs. McCoy and her sister, Miss Hannah, good friends. And I'll explain that a little bit later. The original Westernport Library really began way back in 1925. It was in a single room. I think there's, if I remember, 3 rooms in the upstairs of what is today the city building. And it was in one of those rooms. Now, you have to be punished to go to that library, because if you've ever gone up the stairs from the ground floor to the second floor of the city building, that's quite an undertaking. And fortunately, Mrs. McCoy and Miss Hannah uh, uh, were younger, and I'm sure very healthy at the time that they spent time up there. When they started their collection, they had no books, and the collection was started by a group of friends of the library, and they collected 100 books. And that's how the Westernport Library began, at that location. The hours of operation in the early days, I don't have that much on the hours, but in terms of times, the library was open on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and pretty much stayed all that way until the late 50s. I have a note here that says 1960, but I do think it was just a little bit before that. And it stayed open when they moved the library in the late 50s. It went down to what is today the mayor's office of the city building. And that when you look out the windows of the west side of the city building, you're looking down at the beautiful Georges Creek. And so it's, I remember going through the door that you go through to go to the into the mayor's office, and then the council chamber. The council people have office also, and that whole thing from front to back became the library, which really opened up a lot of very, very new possibilities. Nellie Hannah McCoy was the first librarian, and was so for 40 years, believe it or not. And not only that, she was also the librarian at Bruce High School. And yet, you know, she worked 5 days a week at the school, worked Wednesday, and her sister, Mary Hannah, on Wednesday, and then they were both there on Saturdays. So those were the days you went to the library. And then once they opened the new library, they had longer hours. And by 1960, Nellie McCoy, I think if we look back at some of those newspaper records, I think she actually retired about that time. And I think her sister, Mary Hannah, who was also a teacher, she taught at both Bruce High School and Piedmont High School. Taught typing to my wife at Piedmont High, and taught typing to me at Bruce High as we went through our high school years. She was Mrs. McCoy was also known as a pioneer librarian in the Allegany system, library system, such as it was in those years. And she had a bequest, a request, not a bequest, a request at her retirement party when she retired, that she hoped that the library would be used, especially since it was open more and had more editions available. And she asked that people would patronize the library, and that she knew that it would be a far better place to live in town, having those kind of resources available. I remember those early years because I spent a lot of time in the library for a lot of different reasons, but often on Saturdays and all the time through summers. I continued to read history books, but more important to me, they had a wonderful, wonderful collection of historic fiction. And I learned so much and could tie the two things together. So that's a good memory. Um, so the two of them worked tirelessly for us. Miss Hannah was older than Mrs. McCoy. And actually, Miss Hannah, believe it or not, I have a picture of her at the Heritage Society standing with her group of boys and girls at the Luke School when it opened. And it's long since been torn down. So she was around a long time and stayed very active. Both of them did. Um, let's see, catch my next set of notes here. Yeah. So I commented that I really knew both of the ladies quite well for a lot of different reasons. They were dear, dear friends and of about the same age as my grandfather, Arthur Fazenbaker, who lived a block away on Hammond Street. I lived a block away from where they lived on Hammond Street, the opposite direction. And the two ladies were my family's landladies. So I got to take the rent down to them every month, either at the library, but mostly to their house. And I really, they live together there on Hammond Street. And it's easy to spot their house if you don't know. If you drive onto Westernport Hill and make a turn on Fusner Street, you'll look up and you will see a beautiful white Victorian staring back to you. Right now, it's easy to spot because it has orange window shades, but it has a turret and it's just an absolutely beautiful. It's not a painted lady, but it is really a beautiful, beautiful home still. So I spent a lot of time there, and I have the memory of uh, going to their house for paying the rent, and Mrs. McCoy usually always took care of it. And she would take the rent money and go in someplace in the house. To this day, I don't know where she went, but she wrote her receipt. And while I stood there in the vestibule waiting, I could hear, I could smell the beautiful, beautiful all oak paneling and woodwork, as was so typical of a Victorian. And the grandfather clock just off to my left in the living room with its tick tock, tick tock. And of course, it was a very, very quiet home. A little scary sometimes, but they were very, very dear, dear people to me. Um, so I knew her through most of my young life, and I will always cherish the memories of that particular library. One of the other quick things that I wanted to add is that when they took the books from upstairs and brought them down, and they got a lot of new books in, they really didn't have a whole lot, so they discarded some things, and they were out on the curb waiting for trash to pick up. And I walked by them, started over the bridge and came back, and I started rummaging through them. And Mrs. McCoy came to the library door and she opened it and she said to me, you know, what are you doing? And I said, could I have these books? And she said, oh, you certainly may, but you better get them out of there. So I made 4 trips up and down the hill carrying a box of books and ended up with leather-bound, complete 100-year-old versions of some of the best writers of the 1800s, including George Washington Irving. Had a complete set of the Lincoln years, Carl Sandburg's Paramount study that he did of the biography. I had some of the E.P. Rowe, a number but they were all at least 100 years old. And as she said, we're getting rid of them because of their age, because, you know, if you spread them open too far, you know, they'll begin to separate. So I cherish those books and turned them over to a Mormon family who were home teaching their children back in 1993 when I left my office for the last time as principal of Hickory School. And they, as far as I know, they're still part of their selection. So now, going on, I'd like for you to and let me make sure here, get all the rest of my notes. Okay. Sorry about that delay. I was talking and moving around and I lost track. All right. So, you know, those were wonderful times. At the time in 1970, when the commemoration of the opening of the new library, unfortunately, Shirley and I were living in Harford County at that time. But when we came home, we made our first visit after its opening. We were home for a while in the summer and we were able to get down and talk to Mary Ord, who was the first librarian of the new library. Mary and I were pretty good friends. She was a master organist and pianist, and played at the Roman Catholic Church. And in those days, I sang at a number of almost said funerals, weddings at St. Peter's and a couple other places where she played and I sang. And I remember Mary so well, but especially got to see her more since she was in the library. So it's another nice warm thought. The day that one of the surprises that occurred on the opening of the new library, according to the news, Kathy sent me a little note here. Everyone was surprised when it was announced that Westvaco had sent a check down with Harris LaFew, who was public relations at that time, and they presented at the grand opening the check for $10,000. And interestingly enough, it satisfied the balance remaining on the new building. So it was paid off that day. They only had $10,000 and Westvaco, you know. And if you go down to the community room today, there's still a plaque there that says the Westvaco room. John, I don't know whether you've seen that when you've been in there, but it's a nice memory. Now I'd like to take us back 50 years quickly. So if you could put up my first photograph, we'll take a look at where the library sits now in relationship to what was once there. Thank you, Ashley. This, of course, is a picture of the library as it looks today, not all that long ago. You can see, of course, the front of the library. And if you look to the far side of the front, there's a door, and that door, we all know, goes into the community room and the Westvaco room, as it has been called. And many of us have held meetings and made presentations there over the years. So those are warm memories also. If you look directly behind it, you see a massive wall with a set of stairs that go upstairs. And those have not always been as they are today. That's the James C. Welch, Welch, I'm sorry, hardware store. And that was a real fixture and has been in the town since it was built in the late 30s. And right where the parking lot is, about half of that parking lot was an Esso service station. In fact, I think it was some other brand early on, but there was a little shed there where you could, get your gas and air and things like that. James A. Welch and Son owned the whole building. It had a wonderful slogan under its banner on the front. Mr. Welch said, "We have it in stock, we'll get it, or it isn't made." And for many years, that was absolutely the truth. If you couldn't find something, Mr. Welch could get it for you. He and his 4 sons kept that going for many, many years until they were all older. And the last son, Paul, just died 3 or 4 years ago. And that's the end of that immediate family. Going on to the next picture. Now, if you look at the cars, it's hard to imagine on Main Street that there could be a multiple collision accident, but there was. It's hard to imagine. Looking at the models of the cars, we're looking at about 1956. The building that's in front of you is a clapboard, typical duplex home that is sitting about where the lane goes back between the library and the post office. The Kearns family lived in the left side. The family were good friends with my family. And on the other side at that time, I think, well, it doesn't immediately come to mind, but it had been there for a long time. If you look at the building right behind it, I believe, unfortunately, let's see if I can get rid of, get to full screen. There it is. That works better for me. And so you can see Welch Supply on the building furthest right, and we talked about it. There's the Esso station. The next building was not only apartments on one side and above, but a business that is labeled at that time for the first Western Auto that was ever in Westernport. And it was owned by the mayor at that time, whose name all of a sudden evades me, but Okie Michaels this was in again, the mid to late 50s. At that time, he had the Western Auto Store. You'll see another picture in a little bit that shows it as a laundromat. It also had been the bus stop for Westernport back when buses through World War, well, for the late 30s through the war to about the 62 or 63. I'm sorry, yeah, it was 62. I was in college at Frostburg at the time and liked to ride the bus, but then they stopped the bus system. It was also a pharmacy. It had been also a place where my mom and I would go waiting on the bus and have a sandwich or something to drink before we went to Cumberland, or coming back from Cumberland, they had ice cream. So it was a lot of different businesses. And of course, that was purchased. And upstairs, one of the most well-known persons, all history, was Miss Miss Annie Wagner, who taught my mother, taught my grandmother, and she retired before I had her, but she had people coming to call continuously, and she lived in one of the upstairs apartments. So she was a well-known personage as a school teacher, like Mrs. McCoy and Miss Hannah and many others of us. And if we go take a look, if you will, we talked about the double residency. Where you see the tree hanging over, there's a lane that goes back to what was what they sometimes called a tack barn, or a place to keep the horses. There's also a wonderful picture taken about where the white car is of Colonel Schultes, who was a well-known officer in the Spanish-American War. He's standing on his trusty steed, and the bricks, the front of the town roadway is made of bricks, and you can see the railroads for the trolleys that went through Westernport. And there was a picture there, and not far behind him is a horse and buggy pulling stuff. And over on the right side, looking down Main Street, there is what we would call a Tin Lizzie. So it really captures what Westernport was really like in 1906 to World War I. Behind the trees there is the Caldball Mansion. Dr. Caldball was a very, very well known. That is where the most of the post office and the Masons Lodge is today. And then there was one more, and that was the Schultes residence that's not showing here. Could we go on to the next picture, please? Here it is looking a different direction. It looks like maybe it was the same car that got hit, but that one's a little later. That's about 1961 Chevrolet. And so we're looking at the laundromat in a little better picture. Where you see the Atlas Tire sign on the lower right, that is where the door going into the library is. So that gives you a better feeling because of course, the one that you can't see on the right is the Esso service station. It was owned by James A. Welch and Sons. So that gives you, I think, a little better idea. Those are long gone. Westernport did purchase the properties, and they were torn down. And finally, they got the library underway and the post office, which is owned, of course, by the Masons. And then the very next house would have been the Schultes house. All of those properties indeed were gone. Let's see. I think, okay. Wanted to also, Kathy, if I could, and John, you shared it, but I'll run through it very quickly again. The work that was done in 2008 to the library, its first total revision. And it's important to remember that the Allegany commissioners and the library system financed a 6-month renovation. It was modernized, and the layout and the update of the infrastructure and added some additional furniture and so forth to make it more usable. The new furniture complemented the Reeves Woods, which is an enchanted forest that won some awards, and there were many gifts that came from Margaret Peg Reeves. Margaret Peg Reeves was one of my surrogate moms, even though there were no children. I grew up my first 6-7 years in a home owned by the Reeves brothers, right directly next to where Peg and Dr. Norman lived. So she was always looking after me and feeding us good things. And I have a wonderful, wonderful picture of their house and the clinic when the concrete brick or the brick wall, you know what I'm saying, cinder block wall was built in about 1947. And my mom and dad are holding me, and their home and the clinic still exists. If I walk up there and look at it, and I have done that once in a while, it brings back a flood of memories, because right on the other side was a rabbit hutch where my 2 bunnies lived. So I must share that, of course. And so Peg Reeves was a very important part of my life growing up, and did get a chance to have a couple of chats with her once we moved back in town before she became so infirm. And let's see, and I'll finish up. Do we have another picture? I don't think we do.
It was just those 3.
Okay, I remember there was a 4th and we took it out. Okay, so that's I guess that's about it. And I want to thank you all for allowing me to share some of those memories with you. then I'll turn it back over to you all. And here's my Miss Shirley here with me. You have anything you want to say, hon?
No.
Okay.
Well, thank you for sharing, Pat. I learned so much about what the town used to be like long before I was born. And now I would like to thank Tom Finan from the Library Board of Trustees for joining us. Anything you want to say, Tom? But yes, Tom serves on our Board of Trustees, and I'm glad he was able to join us. And we also have Sharon Michael, the daughter of Okie Michael, who Pat mentioned. And what would you like to share, Sharon? I know the library meant a lot to your dad, so.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to this. I grew up in Maryland, in Westernport, and but I went away to college when the library that we're celebrating today was built. But I want to spend most of my time talking about my dad and the Memorial Fund.
They asked me to speak and I couldn't do it.
Oh,
okay. Sorry, we'll give you a chance. Let's see.
What do you want to do?
We can go first. Sharon, since you started, if you want to go first, and then Tom, if you want to say something.
No, Sharon, I didn't mean to interrupt Sharon. Go ahead, Sharon. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to spend most of my time talking about my dad. He was on the Board of Trustees when the current library was built, and he was actually on the board for 20 years between 1960 and 1980, and served as the chair for the last couple years of that term. Since most of you don't know him, and I would like to go over a little bit about his life so that you can maybe understand why we did do the Okie Michael Memorial Fund. He was a long-term, he lived his whole life in Westernport, other than the years he went to college at St. John's in Annapolis, and when he was in the Navy during World War II. After college, he came back and taught at Bruce High School for 4 years, then went to the Navy, and then came back. When he came back, his job at the high school was not available, so he worked at the mill for a couple years, and then he opened the Western Auto franchise for the Tri-Towns. As Pat mentioned, the first place where the auto store was open was right about where the library is now. He later moved it down Main Street, further, pretty much down to the end, across from the bank, and then later moved it over to West Virginia. But for those 30 years, the Western Auto Store was more than just an auto store. It was more or less the general store of the town. I mean, we sold paint, we sold hardware, we sold tools, we sold appliances, we sold furniture, so at Christmas time especially, we sold toys. And Daddy not only would sell the things, he would assemble things for people, he would deliver things. And before credit cards were available, he would do business, he would offer credit to people and do business with a handshake. So because of where he was with the store, he was well known throughout, I think about everybody in the whole Tri-Towns knew who my father was. But he was also very active in a lot of the community things within the town. He, as Pat mentioned, he was on the city council for several terms. He was mayor for a term. He stayed active with the Alumni Association. He was a scoutmaster. He was with the Rotary. I'm trying to think of all the various things he was in. He was into about everything that was going on in Westernport. He was named the first Tri-Town Citizen of the Year. He was inducted into the Bruce High School Hall of Fame. As you can see, I'm a little prejudiced of the type of person my father was. Along with his private life, he was an avid gardener, and he also was a very much do-it-yourselfer. He built our house on Spruce Street in 1940, and then he added on to it in the 60s pretty much doing most of the work himself. So he was doing all that in addition to operating the store, as well as being in all these civic activities. He was very much in supportive of education. And so I think that's what led him to be on the board of trustees. He instilled that in my brother and I. My brother went on to be a librarian for his professional career. I went into nursing, but I still believe in education, obviously. One of the things that when he died, we wanted to figure out some way that we could honor his legacy and help the citizens of Westernport. So in 1994, my family set up the Okie Michael Memorial Fund, which is a endowment fund where the principal stays the same in the fund, well, unless additional is added to the principal, but the interest in that fund is used to provide materials for the Westernport Library. And I have continued to donate to that memorial fund every year since then. And it is open for anybody who wants to contribute. So if anybody else wants to contribute, please talk to John, or I'm sure Kathy could help you out with that too. But we said we do this because we want to honor my father's legacy, and we also want to provide some support to the community of Westernport. So I think with that, I will stop.
All right, thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing.
If I could say something for a second, I was caught up in the technology of not being able to unmute myself. And then I got myself unmuted and I was in the middle of Sharon's comments. So I apologize for that. So ever since I've been on the library board for the past few years, we've been moving the meetings around every month to different libraries. And when we get up to Westernport and go in there, you can sense the history of the place, and you can sense the importance of the library to a community like Westernport, as we sense that when we go into the other branches as well. But it's just so wonderful to have the 50 years of where you've been now showcased in such a interesting way, with people giving testimony about their childhoods, with people talking about the way the library was then and what it meant to them, and for the professional staff today to be able to present this in a way that just honors the history and tradition of the library. I think it's just wonderful. The one thing that stands out to me since I've been on the board is the contribution the library made when Westvaco closed, and you had to be a repository for information and a place for people to go to talk about what to do next, and to you help people write resumes, and you were a locus for what to do next. And I think that showcased the importance of Westernport, showcased the importance of the library to Westernport during a very bad time in its history. So I just want to say well done, and continue the great work.
Thanks, Tom. All right. We were also going to have Bill and Carol Kenny. Bill is a former county commissioner and also was the president of the Tri-Towns Chamber of Commerce. And Carol is currently the leader of the Westernport Library Friends Group. So we'll turn it over to Bill and Carol. See if we can get unmuted.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Bill's sitting here, but I don't know whether he's going to say anything or not. Usually he's not a loss for words, though. You want to say anything before I begin?
Well, you know, where the library is built, there were homes all through there. And there was a lady by Mrs. Morrison who lived in that property. And in order for it to get built, she needed to sell. And she wasn't going to sell under any circumstance. And my mother, who was very good friends with her, convinced her that that was the way to go to help the community. And I don't think a whole lot of people knew that, but that moved the project way ahead once she agreed to sell.
Martha.
Martha Morris.
Martha Morris.
Does anybody remember Martha? No one remembers.
No,
No.
I think she lived in New York, but she.
Yeah.
I did remember her well. The
Yeah.
Morrisons are among the early settlers and probably the wealthiest family.
Yeah, they had a lot of money.
all Westernport ever saw. So, yeah, her sister, Miss Maud, was the housekeeper for the Reverend Stanley Schwind, and she later moved to
Yeah, the
Baltimore.
Episcopal Church, yeah.
Yeah.
Pat, when you were talking about Mrs. Bright, I guess that she's
yes.
related to Shirley.
Yes, Shirley's aunt.
Mary Ethel.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Because I went to I had forgotten about her, but this is just to digress a little bit. Talking about a librarian though. Mary Ethel was the librarian at Piedmont High School.
Yes.
When I was there in the 60s. And she ran that library with a iron hand.
fist.
Yeah, iron fist. And I don't know whether if any of you have ever read books by Grace Livingston Hill. She was an old author. And we had a whole shelf full of books in the library. Back in the day, they were romance novels. So all the high school girls started reading these books, and Mary Ethel must have saw that there was a run on these books. Well, the next thing we knew, the whole shelf of books had disappeared. Censored them.
That would be Aunt Mary Ethel.
Cleaned it up.
Anyway.
Sound like a nun to me.
Anyway, I am chairperson of the Westernport Library Friends Group. Our numbers have kind of dwindled over the years. I guess I don't know, Kathy, what's it been, 3 or 4 years since we've been in existence? Well, before Kathy was librarian, when Barbara was librarian, Barbara actually kind of got us moving to get a friends group. So we did raise money. We did fundraisers. We had the Methodist women did a quilt, and we raffled that. We did bake sales, did a lot of those things to try to raise some money because we started out with nothing. But we've purchased different items for the library, and I'd say probably one of our most successful projects was the Halloween movie night. I think it's been maybe 3 years ago when we had the first one. I mean, the library was just so crowded, you could hardly get in, and there were kids in costumes, and we just, it was just something for the kids to do. And then we had it a second time, and we had a really good turnout. Unfortunately, last year, we didn't get to do it. So if we ever get past COVID, we could do something like that again, but that was very successful one. I think that's about all I have.
Thank you. And I know the movie night was really appreciated and well attended. It was a lot of fun, a lot of chaos, but a good time.
Yes.
All right. And I know that Patrick Murphy had something he wanted to say about helping move the library as a scout.
Yes, it's great to see everybody on here. I haven't been back to Westernport since the beginning of December of 2019. It's good to see Bill Kenny there, especially. I haven't seen him in years since he was still working there at the store.
Your mother was a saint.
Well, I tell you, whenever we had laid her to rest, we put her in the cemetery in her Mrs. Claus outfit.
I can believe it.
Yeah, because everybody remember her, Mrs. Claus, riding the float through town for about 20 or 25 years. But anyhow, two things I just wanted to mention there. The library wouldn't have been a library if it hadn't have been for the Boy Scouts. because the Boy Scouts that I was part of Troop 30, and I later went to Troop 36 with Jack Fazenbaker, who had since passed away a year or two ago. Troop 30 was called upon to move all of the books from the old library that was in the municipal building over next to George's Creek. You had the health department over there with Mrs. Fromhart. You had the town hall. You had a police station. But the library was in one of those rooms, and I'm sure Pat Mccarty probably has a picture or something of that. But it was probably early 1970 that we had all the Boy Scouts in uniform over there. They had these carriers that the librarians went ahead and loaded up the books over there. And the carriers were like two 2x6s nailed together in an L shape. And we held them up. We had handles on each end, so they would load them up. We were probably about 2 or 3 hours running back and forth from the old library to the new library. So we were the ones to go ahead and get all the books put in over there. One of the things that I wanted to mention, and I'm glad that Sharon is on here. Sharon, I've never met you, but I just want to let you know that your father, Okie Michael, had a great impact on my life. I became an Eagle Scout in 1976. And 3 of the merit badges that I had to get were citizenship in the world, citizenship in the nation, and citizenship in the local community. And he did all 3 of those merit badges there for me. And I got to thinking about the Western Auto Store. And my dad, he was one of his friends, and he would always take me down there to the Western Auto Store shopping. My dad's been gone since 67, whenever I was 9 years old. So this would have been probably whenever I was maybe 4 years old or whatever. In 1962, he let me buy a toy for myself. I still have the toy right here. Little dump truck, you know, it's got the little lever right here. It will, you know, open up the back like that. But my mom was mad at my dad because he had bought this for me and it was all metal. And the thing is, you know, you can beat somebody to death with this, and they don't sell this kind of stuff anymore. But just to let you know, this thing's probably about 60 years old, and I got it from your dad.
That's really nice to hear. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of kids in Westernport that got little toys like that from my dad.
Yeah. So of the 21 merit badges, I got 3 of them through your dad, and he was even at my Eagle Scout Court of Honor back in May of '76.
Yeah, he was an Eagle Scout himself, and then so he really believed in the Scouts.
Yep. But it's great to see everybody.
Thank you for sharing. So I'll go ahead and open it up for anyone else who wants to share any memories of what the library has meant to you, any questions for anyone. Go ahead and open it up.
I just want to say that when Bill Kenny was a county commissioner, he made sure that the library line item in the county budget was well funded.
It was always
Any interest in
full.
running for re-election, Bill?
Pardon? No. No, I did my term, Tom.
It is really so nice seeing the folks who are here. Sharon, it's been many, many years, and living out at the end of Walnut Street, our garages are just a block away from where you used to live. So I always comment to Shirley, that's where you all lived, and I delivered newspapers to you at one time. So it's so good to see you, Sharon. And John Gallons, you're coming to us from California? Yeah, you need to unmute.
Yes, from North Hollywood.
There we go.
Yeah, I've been out here for Pat. How long have I been out here? Pat Murphy remembers everything. He remembers from his being at 4 years old. He remembered a toy. Of course, he still has the toy, but he actually remembers the day he went down to the store and bought the toy. No.
Well, I tell you, just to chime in, John, today is your, let me see, it would be your 40, 47th anniversary today. You got on the plane and went to Los Angeles 47 years ago today.
Mind blown.
John and I have some good memories from Valley High and Frostburg.
Wow.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I've been away a long time. I come back there when we don't have a pandemic. I'm usually back there at least sometime early December for a week or so. Yeah.
Wow.
But
Yeah. And
wow.
Lisa, so nice to see you. I guess you're in Fairfax.
Yes, I'm coming from Fairfax, Virginia, tuning in. It's wonderful to see you and Mrs. Mccarty.
Yes, thank you.
It really is. And you have such good delivery when you give presentations.
Well, thank you very much.
And your voice, and it's just so
Yeah.
calming and enjoyable, and all the tidbits that you offer.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're wonderful memories. That's what brought us back here after 40 years, but we
Right.
still enjoy the history, and we're very, very much tied to the history of all the communities. One of the things that will be forthcoming before long is a book written by Tom Cogan on the early history of Piedmont. It should run somewhere between 150 and 170 pages. Shirley and I are at work. We do the grunt work, I guess, the editing, designing, and so forth. So Tom and I have been writing things together since the 5th grade. So we're looking forward to that.
Well, Piedmont was a happening place. My mother
Sure
was a
absolutely.
proud graduate of Piedmont High.
And he really brings it alive. He really does. And part of my job is kind of embellish the writing, and which we've always done together. And so it's it's a lot of fun, but exceedingly time consuming. So it's nice. I guess that's one of the outcomes of COVID. We're kind of tied to our homes. But I really wanted to thank all of you from the library system, and I look forward to being able to do some things, some joint things with children at the library, using materials and artifacts, from our museums. And we do hope to reopen the Railroad Museum there on Maryland Avenue. That hopefully will be open by midsummer. We've been set back an entire year because of COVID. Nothing has been open, but many of us work privately on things at the railroad station. But we started laying low about the beginning of November again with the upsurge. So, and I know, John, you all are dealing with that with the library. So it's it'll be good to get everything back open and start living some normal life. Renee, thank you for being here too.
Do want to mention Mr. Mccarty is always our host of the St. Patty's Day presentation. Yes, does a wonderful job.
Name like Patrick, we know what we're doing, right, Pat?
I'd like to share a small memory.
Absolutely.
So, the library opened in 1970, and I was 8 years old. And I just thought it was the coolest place. And I love books to this day. I had a babysitter on Main Street, and I would leave elementary school at Westernport Elementary and hang out at the library and go to my babysitter's house. And I recall the shelves of magazines. Now, I know you still have magazines, Kathy. Oh, you don't have any magazines?
Because of COVID, we don't have any magazines right now.
But you did. You had them until close. But I looked up Olga Korbett's Olympic year, which was 1972.
Yep.
And I recall being just so fascinated with her. And I would stop in the library and just pick up that same magazine and just look at the pictures of her and what she did. So that's 1972. And another and I would meet friends there. But another memory, and this is a riddle me this, and I'm sure you all can tell me, I've always remembered the homemade gingerbread house. So if you look at the front desk, if you're just a patron walking in and the front desk and Mrs. Ord are right there in front of you, and back toward the West Vaco room, is that what it was called? The West Vaco room? I want to get that company name right. There was a gingerbread house. So riddle me this, who made that homemade gingerbread house? It was beautiful.
That can't be answered. Probably be more fun to eat it, although a little dry.
I took a piece off of it and I ate it. And this is the first time I've ever told someone. I took a little piece off the corner and I thought, this can't be what I'm supposed to be doing. But I've always wondered.
We don't want to miss Rob. I see him over there in the corner. Wonderful that you're here, because you're the one who, like Shirley, is at her side. My side is Shirley, and you with Kathy. But it's nice to have him here, Kathy.
All my family is
saying
here.
A few words.
They are.
Hey, Rob.
I just want to add, oh, go ahead, Rob.
What's that?
I said, go ahead, Rob. Were you going to say something?
No, not really. But Kathy, ever since she's gotten started involved with the library, she's goes into things 100%. And she tries to come up with ideas almost on a weekly basis that she can do to help get people some books, even if they have to take them out on the street corner and in a brown paper bag. But
that's what we're here for.
Just another quick aside, Lisa Maloney, excuse me. In 1952, when you were looking at Olga Corbett, Shirley and I bought our very first color TV, a Sylvania, and it was bought for that purpose, because it was coming on, and we finally said, well, we have to give up our 1959 model 400-pound black and white.
You bought that in 1972.
Yeah, but think of the juxtaposition of what we're doing this evening versus what many of us in Westernport saw TV snowy in 1954 with 3 channels. So, when you look around with people strung out all over the country, and we're all here talking with each other. And I remember Dick Tracy in the newspaper had a wrist radio. So, and everybody said that could not possibly happen, that anything could be that small.
I've often thought of that, Patrick. Yeah, the old wrist radio that he had. Never happened, but it's fun to think about.
Right. Oh, you were Dick Tracy. Tell something about your age, Johnny.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got me first in line. I'm getting my COVID shot on Thursday. Hey.
Good.
Rob and I are getting ours on Friday.
Hey, all right.
Well, aren't you lucky? Because some of us are 75 and older, and we can't seem to find out where to get them. Out, and everything's always backed up, and you can't, get on anybody's list. And so, that's all right. The time will come.
It'll come. Just hang in there.
It's hard just getting it all out and doing things.
Patrick, all this library stuff aside, I have to know how 6 cars can run into each other in Westernport.
That's right. Absolutely.
Now or then.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Carol, you had something you wanted to say?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say, Mom is 93, and she used to come in the library every week and get a couple books. And so now I've been ordering them online for her and taking them to her, and I read them and she reads them. But I know she said to me today, she says, she lives by herself. She says, I just haven't had, I can't get outside She said, I can't go anywhere. She said, I don't have anybody to talk to. She says, so I just read all day long. So that's been her mainstay while this whole thing through COVID, because my sister and I don't want her to go anywhere anyway, her age. We want her to stay in, but the library just, you know, I keep getting books for her, and, you know, that's been very helpful.
It has been, and it helps us keep our sanity. We're currently reading, what's it called?
And Lisa, I'm going to put it on my list of sleuthing to find out who made that gingerbread house.
She's coming after you.
Does anyone else have anything to say before we close it out for this evening?
I'd very much recommend where the Crawdads sing, if any of you are looking for wonderful
reading
where
now.
Shirley and I have wonderful reading time.
Oh, yeah, I've read that, Patrick. That is a wonderful book.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And, well, not quite halfway through, but we've gone through so many books.
Hey, Pat, there's one that's going to be very similar to that Crawdad book, and it's called Waiting for the Night Song by Julie Carrick Dalton, Dalton. And the reviews on it says, you know, if you like the Crawdad book, you're going to like this one. Waiting for the Night Song.
This is Delia Owens, who has really captured everybody's attention. She's so very descriptive, and it's poetic, actually. So it's a different kind of book, even though it's a murder mystery.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly appreciate everybody sharing their memories. This is great, and thank you, Maureen, for putting this together and recording this. So this is going to be a great memory and a great, again, keepsake for all of us. And thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone in 50 years.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you for having it. It's great.